Right. So I will release that thing somewhere so I don't ever touch it. And we're going to start recording. So tonight is the second round table that we had. The questions for this are from youth and high school sports coaches, strength coaches, physical education teachers, and parents who are interested in what is best in the way of youth movement and strength development. This is the two guys and a parent that Joe works with, and they literally have the high school coach is the football coach, and I think he might be a part-time AD. And the middle school guy coaches football, and he and the coach at the high school work together, and he does other sports. And he also is in, kind of has control of the Little League football and some Little League sports within the entire town. So they've kind of got what I would say was a kind of a perfect storm because they can work with all the kids throughout up from the beginning to the end. So I said, told Joe, I said, give me 5 or 6 questions. So he gave me five. And now that we got Nick's, we'll add it in here. The first question is he said it's from a dad who really gets the picture on LTAD. Says, my questions initially are really about ignition. How do I get my community at a young age to see the value and buy into training for years without immediate satisfaction that they crave? And I think that's a really good question. And I'm going to let you guys go first, and then I will wait till the end because, yes, I do have an answer to that. So, anybody want to jump in first on that one?
Well, I'll throw the first couple of thoughts out. The idea, we get caught in trying to compress time, and I think the best analogy that I would speak with that parent is, when it comes to cognitive literacy, it took time for you to learn to read and all this concept of starting with the alphabet and progressing through. And the same thing applies to physical literacy. There is a learning sequence that's vital, and it's one of those pay me now or pay me later. And we get caught. A lot of parents get caught at the end result. They see a game and or they see a play where they scored a touchdown, or they see a run, or they see a some kind of skill, etc. And they only look at the goal. Did they make a touchdown? Did they make a basket? Did they strike the ball or whatever? And there are lots of things that contribute to athletic performance. And the better the foundation, the better prepared the athlete is to um, to perform. And they get caught in sport. Are you a basketball player? Are you a soccer player? Are you a volleyball player? And I personally, our programs have always been focused, and I'll create an athlete and then let that athlete choose the sport that they're interested in. So that's just a start.
Very good start.
Yeah,
Michelle?
I actually would say to the dad, is there some things that he's doing in his life to keep himself athletic over his own longevity? And then perhaps that's a way the parents and children can engage together. So, in other words, like I remember my dad was a marathoner and I started running with him. And we would go to like a fun run, and he'd run the 10K and I'd run the 1 mile or the 3K. And it was a fun event for both of us because we could both go, and my mom and my sister went, and where it wasn't about who got a better time or any of that, but we were both like doing a sport together. So what I'm thinking, it's just more like if the dad, it's that good old fashioned, if you want a kid to play, if kid wants to play baseball, go throw with him, pitch with him, the little bat, find a field and do some of the work together. And then maybe the father can see how being healthy, doing things his age and his capacity, his son can say, hey, you know what, when I get to be my dad's age, I can still throw a ball, catch a football, those types of fun things. That's what I would suggest.
Grant?
Well, I think so. All this starts with the parent, and so if you look at physical literacy, it's it's all things that are pretty much parent driven. You're playing catch, you're throwing, you're catching, you're running, you're jumping, all you're skiing, all the different things. And so, in my mind, look up the research. There's all this research that says playing one sport is not beneficial to you. So, I'm finding stuff. Just this week, I found a bunch of stuff on it that I just accidentally ran into, and you don't build the accountant first and then try to teach him all these other things. You build the student first, then you make him the accountant. But he's got a big background of a whole lot of education, so there's a reason why being a doctor or being an accountant or something takes about 16 or 20 years of schooling to accomplish the task.
Hi, Leo.
Athletic
Hi, guys.
development's the same thing.
I'm going to ask you this question in a second when Grant gets done. So,
I'm done.
because this is our first question.
Hi,
You're
Leo.
done.
I'm done.
Hi, guys. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. So our first question was, it's from a dad. He said, my questions initially are really about ignition. How do I get my community at a young age to see the value and buy-in to training for years without immediate satisfaction as they crave? That's because they want immediate satisfaction. So how do I get my community to do this? You want to think about that for a second? And I'll say something and then you can come back to you. Leo?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
good.
Okay, so it's funny that this came up because I wasn't looking at the questions and looking for answers. But I got on something this morning. Somebody said something about writing and why kids don't write and how writing leads, and they just do computers. And they did a study and they found that if you write your notes, you will cognitively remember them better. But everybody's typing now. Well, why can't kids write? Writing is a fine motor movement pattern. And if you don't do gross motor movement patterns, you can't do fine motor movement patterns. So as we took our education system into the computer age, we forgot this. So now we have these kids that can't write because they can't do things. They're on computers at 3 years old. So I looked even more at this and I thought, okay, well, how do we get people to understand this? Well, I think we need to start identifying it to parents through some emails or some notifications to them from the school system on why we're doing some things. For example, I found things that why do you do drills slow? Well, you do drills slow because you learn control first and safety of doing the drill. And then you can cognitively get onto it. And so why can't they lift heavier? Well, you don't take bad movements and just load it. They had to learn the movements before you load the movements. And then the next thing I thought was, is this enough conditioning? Well, what's enough conditioning? For God's sakes, it's time to figure out that you layer the intensity once the movement is sound. You don't just start pounding bad movement, by telling them, as I've said in the past, if you want to see bad movement, bad running, just go drive by a middle school. It's horrible. It's ugly. If I ran like that, I wouldn't want to do it either because nobody taught them how to do this stuff. So I think we need to start throwing some information out there from the school system to the recreation systems, everything on why we're doing this. Why are we not just saying, okay, everybody's a professional athlete at 5 years old? They're not. And if we don't teach them this stuff, they're not going to know. So I think that, as Grant said, it's about parents, and I agree. And then Larry said it's about parents, and Michelle said it's about doing things with your children. And we're not doing that. We're expecting somebody else to do it. So go ahead. That was just my thought on it. Leo, what do you got?
I'm still thinking, but I think there needs to be creative ways of communicating not only to the parents but to the kids, because it's been drilled into them that it's all about competition. And I'm all for competition. But it has to be kind of measured where it's not all about the competition, because a lot of times what the kids are doing now, that's all they do is play. They don't get the skill, they don't get the locomotive skills they need to begin with. So there needs to be, especially earlier ages, there needs to be some creative ways of making it competitive within the learning environment. And I think a lot of times the learning kind of takes a back seat to just going out and playing. I mean, there needs to me, I like the competition part. I think it's really important. I mean, but don't make everything about competition, or don't make everything about just the learning either, because they're going to get bored, and they're going to, the parents as well as the kids. And but a measure, there should be a balance between, okay, if you're say training 10 hours a week, 2 hours should be competitive, the other 8 hours should be all learning. That's at least my thought, because the kids need to compete, because that's what it's been ingrained in them, that they need to do that. And they like to play, and they like to win, and they like to be competitive. So I don't think we should take that away from them, but they have, if they're competing with bad skills, they're not going to get any better over the years. So just my thought.
One of the things you had
The
said that I
other,
liked earlier, just a second, Larry, when another talk was how when we're looking at certain judging or defining how they are in certain skills, you don't just have to have a test day. You can actually do that while you're teaching a class. You don't just have to have a test day. You can see that. And then the other thing is in competition, and then Larry, go ahead and go. But I think that, it's kind of like if you ever take a group of fifth or sixth graders out and try to teach 3/4 speed running, it ends up being a race because they're competitive. They're naturally competitive. You don't want to take that away from them by just doing drills,
Yeah.
but somehow we want to explain to them that they need to run correctly and before they do all that stuff. But so go ahead, Larry. What were you going to say?
well, I just think, you know, there are a lot of youth coaches, sport coaches at many levels that truly don't understand, first of all, the difference between sport skills and sport movement skills. But, you let the sport coach with the sport skills. But truly think there are a lot of coaches, and certainly maybe 99% of parents have no idea of sport movement skills and what to look for and how to, and this, quite frankly, takes a ton of time from the sport leader or the director or whatever, but to create a standard of what you would like taught at kindergarten, first grade, second, third, etc., and at least have some uh, uh, benchmarks, etc. Uh, we tend to promote, or we tend to push a kid on to the next level, and they may not have the technical skill to do the next level, and all we've created is bad technique. And there is not one of us sitting on this screen that knows it takes far more time to correct technique than it does to teach technique.
Sure.
And it just becomes an ongoing commitment. I mean, this is no small task. And directors of a program have to know this is slow. This might, you might see swimming upstream for 4 years, 3 years, 5 years until you've established, I guess I call it a championship culture. And I'm not talking about a damn trophy. I'm just talking about what it takes to be an athlete. What are the skills that I need to be or to at least possess to perform at my level?
That's good points, one of the things I think you and I talked about several years ago when we were doing the youth movement, which is now whatever they call the one with the NSCA, LTAD, is LTAD an appropriate term, or should it be long-term movement strength development rather than long-term athletic development? Because there is a certain number of our population out there, people, that when you say long-term athletic population, they think you're only talking about athletes, or they think that you're only, I was accused of, well, you're just thinking of football players. Nah, I was thinking about every kid being an athlete in his own right, which is kind of the way I said it when I was teaching. So I think sometimes we need to really kind of define what we're really trying to do. I was thinking, why did I get into this thing this morning? It was the thing about the writing and how writing is a fine motor movement. And if you don't do fine, you don't do, if you don't do gross motor movements, you can't do fine motor movements. Well, that's the difference between basic skills and athletic skills. If you can't do the basic skills, how are you going to do the athletic skills? And one of the things I thought with somebody made a comment and I said, do we even define the difference between what is muscle memory and what is a motor movement pattern? Are they the same thing or are they something different? And they are something different. But we have, I think, a tremendous amount of the population that think that everything is muscle memory. We haven't really defined for everybody what that is, and what a motor movement pattern is. So that's kind of where I got into that. But no, I agree with everything everybody's saying. So I think
Okay,
this will.
so what's muscle memory?
Well, I came up with one of those. Uh, it's the unconscious ability to perform a movement without conscious thought due to repeated practice. It's
Okay,
automatic. Go ahead.
is that muscles or is that brain?
I think that's brain.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. So there's no such thing as muscle memory.
Brain
That's one
memory.
of the points. That's one of my points. So, what is a motor movement pattern? The definition for that was a learned sequence of of muscle activations that produce a certain or specific movement skill. It's structured and intentional. And honestly, the difference. We had a guy come in from that did his PhD at Ball State. He was at Cal State Fullerton for his master's. And we had this thing a few years ago, and he came in and talked about muscle memory. He said, muscle memory is the muscles in your body that produce a 300-pound bench press. There are stem cells within the muscles that are there to do the 300-pound bench press. If you stop doing bench pressing, those begin to shrink. They don't go away. So if you come back and start bench pressing again, you will be able to create a 300-pound bench press again. And I always think that I'm one of those guys because when I was 60, when I couldn't squat anymore, and I decided I was going to go in the old Olympics and bench over 300 pounds. So I spent 4 or 5 months getting ready to do this, and I benched 300 pounds when I was like 15 years old. So I've always been at the point where I think I can bench 300 pounds, and I still think I could do it today if I really wanted to put myself through the time to do it. So, but that's not but that's kind of a motor movement pattern, but not the same thing. But as I said today to some people when I was talking, I said, the problem is, and Bob Takano told me this one time, we were over in Iceland for about a week, and he says, the reason we have problems in USA weightlifters is people don't understand motor learning. And we're certifying coaches that don't understand motor learning and don't understand that it takes repetition after repetition after repetition to get to a point of being able to do that skill automatically. And we want to pick up big weights rather than specifically go to that. So we're not very patient. And I'm not sure that's not what Larry and everybody's saying in terms of our youth coaches. We have youth coaches that, they're coaching a 10 and under football team. And my God, you'd think they're coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers or somebody in the Super Bowl. It's like, good God, you're working with 10-year-olds here. So I don't think we have enough people, and and unfortunately, and for us, the thought product came to me that I think the reason that physical education is so looked down upon by academic people is that they don't understand motor movement and how it develops cognitive learning, and they don't realize the academic people don't realize how much we do in physical education that enhances their academic program. But the question is, do they do anything in their academic program that enhances what we do in physical education? Because they spend so much time putting down, it's okay for you to miss your PE class so you can come here and do some extra credit. Well, wait a minute, you know, that's not true. My class is just as important as your class. So I think there needs to be, just as it's me, I think there needs to be a redefining of the importance of all this stuff to the total child. We always talk about we're teaching the total child. Are we? Are we teaching the total child right now in education? I don't know. I'm not sure we are. But okay, we pounded that one. Anybody else got anything to say? I'll go to question number 2. Okay, question number 2 is yeah, you got a question? Anything? Grant, did you say something?
No, I
No?
didn't say anything.
Okay. How do we ensure long-term athletic development principles are prioritized over early specialization at a young age? How do we ensure long-term development principles are prioritized over early specialization? Who wants to go first on that?
The first stud has to be the HMF of the program.
The HMF is what?
Well, it's head, and then you can get the last 2 words that go with that. But somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to have I think, a vision. What do I want the program to look like? And what do I want my skills, techniques, both sport movement and sport skill movement, to look like in a month, a year, 2 years, 3 years? What do I want the program to look like in 5 years? I think there needs to be, and I'm not
Because I
talking
want you
about
to
one, and I'm
okay,
not
I
talking
want you
about
to
one
look at
person
this.
making this decision, but I think the parents and the kids, the coaches, and the community need to realize there are goals and there's a mission, and we as a community can get there.
I don't know if you were here for this, but I want to emphasize this and I want you to emphasize this thoroughly when we think about this. This guy that Johansson knows is one of them is the head football coach at the high school, and I think he has something to do with the athletic department. The other one, they're good friends, is the head football coach at the middle school and part of athletics department. And the guy at the middle school is involved with controlling most of the lower elementary and recreation department football, baseball, and programs throughout the community. So answer that question, Larry. How do we help this guy get that across to
I
those
guess,
guys? Think about that.
the first thing I guess I would do is I would look in at our school staff, and I'd look at community leaders and I'd look at youth sport coaches, and I would try to put together a nucleus of people. And it would, I suppose, you would need representatives from all sports. I don't know about all, I don't know how all this would work, but yeah, I think it, yeah, you have to have somebody that has the steering wheel that knows where we're going. But this is not a solo approach, and it takes, I think, support from the staff, but the staff has to have a commitment and they have to have a passion for the same goals of where do we want our program to be in 3 years? Where do we want it in 5 years? And they, and just sitting down and hammering out some things. And in the beginning, I don't think we have to hurry. I would rather see them take 6 months or whatever as opposed to 2 weeks and rush it and not figure it totally out. And then start to either ask people outside the field. And there's not one of us on this uh, program tonight that couldn't name one or two people that that would be most gracious to look at. What's the program look like and how could we develop it? And the big thing, I think, is to teach coaches or those involved, parents, coaches, whoever's involved, a sequence model. And this is how we do it. So that was the start. And I'm willing to, I'm most willing to listen to what everybody else says. I just started it.
Who's up next? Michelle?
I'll go. I think to the question and to ensure that LTDs prioritize over specialization is maybe the high school and middle school coaches get together with their sports and I just kind of wrote some things down from those basic sports. We talk football, baseball, soccer. I'll just use those. Um, track and field in there too. Kids need to know how to run. They know how to catch. They need to know how to throw, and they need to know how to kick. So maybe those coaches work with the elementary kids and say, can you kick a football? Can we kick a soccer ball? Can we kick any ball? Can we kick it through a goal shaped thing? So they learn direction as well as speed, power, aiming. They don't have to learn be football specific, but maybe one day they all try a football that day, or the next day it's a baseball or a softball, and then maybe like I said, kicking balls and just to practice the kicking. Um, and if you focus on those basic skills that all those coaches want to create the basics of their athletes, maybe the kid says, I like throwing a football and I want to practice throwing it at a small target. So I'm a better thrower because maybe one day I want to be a quarterback. But then there's people that got to catch it. So hopefully you pair up the kid that likes to throw with the kid that likes to catch and let them play with each other that way. I know with my daughter's soccer, the coach sometimes liked to put the offense in a defense section so the offenders knew what the defense was going to do. And so sometimes you can switch around roles that way and do it maybe when it's kind of young enough where the kids get to explore what they prefer.
Okay. Okay. Who's up? Leo?
I all these things sound really good. We're all on the same page and we know what needs to be done, but how do we change the culture? Because the culture right now isn't accepting of that. They're entrenched in their competition only, LTAD. They have no clue what that is, and they don't really give a crap. All right, they want their kids out there playing, and that's what the parents want. And the parents are usually the ones that are running the rec programs, so they're doing what the parents want, and not necessarily what the educators know they need. So to me, we're all on the same page. I don't think we disagree on virtually anything, because we know educationally what needs to be done, but changing the culture, how do we do that? Why do we even have these discussions? Because all we're doing is pumping each other up, saying how wonderful our ideas are, and they are. But how do we convince those that don't have the same philosophy?
Well, what would you tell this
That's
guy?
the frustrating part for me.
What would you tell these guys? Because they do have a position where you have the high school football coach that with the middle school guy and involved with all of the youth sports in the town. What do you tell that guy with what we're saying right now? What would you tell him? Because I think you're right, but here's a guy they have control over this. What should they do at this point in
Who
time?
do we tell? Do we tell the youth coaches, or do we tell the middle or high school coaches and hope it trickles down? Where do we start?
I think I think one of the things is, yeah, I hammer on these three things, but I think they're vital: information, education, and communication. And I think it's vital to get in front of parents and explain what the hell we're doing or what we would like to accomplish. And there is all the sorts of research that would support what we say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents are so misled and so have such a lack of information and education about sport development that I think it would be refreshing. Plus, we bring um, a professional background to what we're doing. These guys that are in charge obviously are staff members. And getting in front of parents, I think, is vital. And even getting in front of community leaders, whether it be a Kiwanis Club or whatever, and just explain where the program, what we're trying to develop, and why and how come, and ask for their support.
Okay. Grant?
Um, you, as somebody said, I forget who it was, Leo or I can't remember. Anyway, you have to change the culture.
Mhm.
Culture starts at the college. Okay, until you get the colleges teaching this, you're not you're not going to get anybody. Okay, because all the parents ever see is that, oh, look at this guy, and ever hear him playing is football. Well, if that guy only played football or basketball or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Then that's the way we must go. And going back to, it's great to practice a movement over and over again, but that's the bad part about that philosophy is that we have people thinking, oh gee, I gotta only shoot jump shots 500 or 600 times a day or 1,000 times a day, whatever it is, and so I don't have time for anything else. The colleges aren't going to change because it takes too much effort. Until you change the ones coming out of the college that will go into the school and teach it, you're not going to get very far with the change.
But that's, to me, Rufus, that's the problem. I went to Westchester University outside of Philly, and it's known for its health and physical education program when I went there 50 years ago. They don't have they don't have a teaching part of it anymore.
How
It's
sad
exercise.
that is.
It's
How
exercise. I
sad.
know. And that's happening in a lot of places. That's my
Well,
point.
no, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying, and forgive me for interrupting, but I agree
No,
with
you're
what you're
good.
saying. I agree with what you're saying, and that's why I'm saying, I have a good friend of mine that's a college professor in kinesiology here at the local college here in town, and we talk about this all the time. I said, why don't you start teaching? He says, I can't. Why? Because that's not what the department mandates. They want
Exactly.
this. I said, well, change it. He goes, I can't. And and then he started telling me, he says, if I were to write something, do you know how long it would take me to get it published? I said, no, how? And he goes through all these steps and adds up to about 8 years, I think, 8 or 10 years. He would write a book and have to go through the school and all this other stuff. He goes, by the time it gets published, it's out of date. And so, it's kind of the same thing here, and they won't, it's too much effort for them to change. That's why they teach the same stuff, that they taught 50 years ago. If they do that, right?
So what I'm finding is that these programs are changing to exercise science and kinesiology, but they're taking out the education of the teaching part. When I do USAW level 1 courses, I make a point. I said, look, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff here that you should have gotten in undergrad that you didn't get. Teaching techniques, how you speak, how you relate to your athletes, how do you communicate what we're trying to do, basically the teaching part. And I said, look, you're not getting this in your undergrad. And this is why I think it's really important. I don't care how much you know this information. If you can't get it across, you can't teach it well where they're receiving it, what you're trying to teach, you're spinning your wheels. So I think we should get that back into the colleges, but how do we do that? They need to be more education. That needs to be at least part. You have to take at least one course in education if you're going to be an exercise science major.
Well, go ahead, Grant. Go ahead, then I'll talk.
Well, no, just go along those lines. At IFAS, we had a great internship program, and we had some really smart guys come through that program. The problem was, you'd say, let me see you teach a squat. They have no idea how to do it. So, but they have classes that are exercise, I forget what it's called, but where they're supposed to learn this stuff, and they're not learning it in the school because the teacher that's teaching them doesn't know.
Yeah.
So school is pretty much useless, other than the fact that you get a piece of paper that says, oh, gee, you in X number of years, you completed enough work to satisfy us that we think you can coach or you can teach. So it's not the weekend. So it's like a weekend certification. That doesn't certify you to coach, getting a weekend certification, but 4 years of college doesn't certify you to teach either. All it says is that I went through this.
Well, the irony.
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say my final thought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My final thought is that the coaches coming out or the teachers need to be mentored by somebody else, or the internship needs to be to where they're getting a good internship. So I've been a part of 3 places where we had interns, and 2 of them were the shits. Third one was great. It was unbelievable. But the other 2 were the shits. The guy just stood around. You didn't do anything. You tried to engage him, and he just looks at you like you got 3 heads.
Well, the irony of what you're saying, Leo, is 100% correct. In the California State College and University system, there is not one physical education department. They are all either exercise science or kinesiology. Now, there is one school I know of, and Fresno used to do it, but San Bernardino still does it, where it is you get a degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in exercise science or pedagogies. The pedagogy part is they're teaching them how to teach physical education. At Fresno State, a few years ago, I was talking to Dr. Baldus because I was going up there doing it. He says, he's in charge of the exercise phys lab. And his actual PhD was on motor learning. And he took the course. He says, the problem what we've done here, we went so hard exercise science that we have people that are graduating with exercise science, they don't know how to teach movement. And that's what we've done. So that answers I think in California you can go to, I believe, Azusa Pacific Or you can go to Arizona and New Mexico before you'll get a PE program, physical education program, physical education. And if you want a master's, you have to go maybe as far, last time I checked, as New Mexico to get a master's in physical education or Azusa Pacific. They were the only places. No college, university, California State College University system, of which that is a boatload of schools, believe me, have those programs because we've gotten rid of them. So we're the thing that so that's one problem. When you think football only, you're right. That's all they think about. And when I kind of wrote some notes down here, so I got to write with things I was going. I think these guys are in a perfect storm because they're controlling everything from the youth sports programs through the high school. So what you're saying, who do you go to first, Leo? I think they need to get the two guys at the middle school and the high school get together to decide what they want from the youth sport programs to come into the middle school and into the high school so that we have what I always tell people we need to start using educational terminology, which they call that scaffolding. You got to do first grade skills to be able to do second grade skills to be able to third grade skills. Because as my wife says, if you can't read coming out of the first grade, you're in deep trouble because you have to figure that out in the second grade. If you haven't figured it out by the second grade, you're going to be behind the rest of your life because they don't even, third grade teachers and second grade teachers don't know how to teach reading. They don't teach reading. They assume it's already done, and they don't do remedial. So by the time they get to the middle school, they're now reading on a second or third grade level, and they're in the sixth grade, and they're blaming the sixth grade because these kids are failing. No, it's failed at the end of the first grade. That's when the failure began to happen. So I think what they have to do is get to a point. This is me, and I want you guys to talk about this. I think they need to decide how they're going to get to all of those coaches that they do have some control over at that youth level and say, what do we want from you? And these are the things we want. And that's where we start educating those coaches because they can do this. Can everybody do this? I think if you're in a small town, you can. In Banning, where I came from, you could. But that's what they have to do is they have to get to those guys and the parents. And that's where you send that information to the parents. Why are we doing this? One of the things that I wrote down when Kobe Bryant died, there was a helicopter crash. There was a woman that was on the plane that was one of his coaches. In Kobe Bryant's program, and I'm not a great Kobe Bryant fan, trust me, but I really like what he was doing. The woman that was coaching, the reason he hired her is because she had a specifically tremendous ability to teach basketball skills. And that was her job to teach skills. Because in his program, which is called the Black Mamba or something, and he had this big program going, it wasn't about winning. It was about teaching basketball skills. And the whole thing was based on that. And I think that's what we have to get to is that point. And that's where I think we need to start with those recreational programs. And these guys can do that. And then they've got to move forward because, we can the Russians did that study, I believe, on early specialization versus multilateral learning development. And the multilateral development were the long-term athletes. The early specialization, they die out at 15 because of injuries. They're not progressing. They're burnt out. And so we need to stop that. And the irony is when you look at every Super Bowl in the last 10 years, I think they've come out and said they've listed the 90 some players or 100 players, and you realize that most of them were multi sport kids in high school. They were not one sport specific. Most of them were multiple sport athletes. And we just don't emphasize that enough. And that's something we have to do. So think of that in the next couple of minutes as we talk. We got a couple more minutes on this question, but how would we identify that with these guys? I mean, do you agree with what I'm saying, or what are some other thoughts you have as far as them having that control over those lower division types of programs? What do you think? If you're all in agreement, I'm going to move to the next question. Anybody want anything to add? All right, third question. Uh, what systems are in place to monitor and support the athlete's mental well-being, including stress, motivation, and identity development? What systems are in place to monitor and support the athlete's mental well-being, including stress, motivation, and identity development? Who wants to jump up number one on that one? Larry, are you going to go first again? Put the pressure on you.
I guess first of all, I'm pleading total ignorance in the systems. There might be something that is out there that I use, and I don't know if I use the same terminology. But I think one of the things that we've always done in our program, this sounds trite or unimportant, but a theme that we tried to, especially with our younger kids, is just the terms, the words win the day. And when I say win the day, it might be minor, some minor physical movement, but I want the biggest thing I think in success of learning is the passion or the will to come back tomorrow. I want the kids to come back because they're hungry to learn and they've enjoyed the experience as opposed to because and I'm using a sports scale, but if you stood next to the basket and you threw the ball up 100 times and you only made one basket out of 100, there's not a lot of incentive to come back tomorrow. And I use that as a trite thing, but it could be a movement thing. Um, whether it be first step or whether it be some aspect of deceleration or transitional movements or reacceleration or whatever. And I think a lot of frustration is either what I say to the kids is important, but what they hear is even far more important. And I think, therefore, as you're building a program, there needs to be a list or whatever of terminology so the kids that participate in a fall sport have the same language that participate in winter or spring. And there is a common understanding of a coach in the spring saying the same thing that a coach would say in the fall. And kids can relate to understanding that element. So that's a start.
Okay. Who's up? Michelle, you got
I
to give
would
us a.
say I don't know of a system in place per se, like there, but um, I know I've always, like when I was even coaching adults and stuff, and if they don't, I mean, the analogy before, you shoot it 100 times and you finally make the last one. Well, you made one. One counts. And, then you just maybe go over the movement patterns and say, what, next time let's practice it this way. Next time we're good and see if we can get two. And also don't give them a big enough goal that they feel like they failed. And you don't want to use the word fail. You're just gonna say, hey, you know what? We'll just try it again next time, or we're gonna do this way, or maybe 10 was too much, so we're gonna go back and see if we can get five. And you get these smaller goals that they can accomplish, then they feel like, okay, I can do one more. Five might be too many more, but one I think I can do. And then it sort of builds up their self-esteem and they know their capacity. And I think a lot of kids, especially, and some adults, when you learn your capacity, then you know how you can build on it. And I think we need to kind of encourage them. I know sometimes my coach gives me 10 reps aside on something with a heavy weight, and I can only do 5. And so I say, hey, I can only do 5. And she comes back the next week, okay, now try 7 on each side. It's not that you failed, but maybe she was giving me more to see where I'm really truly at. And I think that maybe needs to convey to the kids, not that you passed or failed, win or lost in some of the everyday training scenarios. Maybe there's some lessons we learned. We learned where we're at. And that can be a big lesson right there.
And I really agree, Michelle. And there are even days where I think and I don't think there's one of us that haven't had, you see a kid or even a group, their nervous system is shot. So it's time to quit. Come back tomorrow. And all and it's easy to get frustrated, and the more the passion to try to get something is bad technique, and it's just okay, come back tomorrow. You got to know when to pull the pin.
Or turn
Okay,
it into a
clear.
game rather than a competition or a goal thing. Maybe that's when you just say, hey, you know what? Here's a jump rope. We're just going to jump rope to the song. And that's the end of class.
Yeah.
You know,
Leo?
Just reminds me of what Michelle's talking about is about my golf game. I'm out there sucking
After
it
you
up.
hit that
And I
third
swear
slice.
I swear to God, we literally say this after we're sucking it up pretty bad, and you hit a really good shot and go, that's why we keep coming back. it's,
Yeah,
it's exactly what she's talking about.
that's
Or,
true.
But
or we're only going to hit a small bucket on this hole.
well, but I think a lot of as far as the mental part, I think one of the things that we teach that I think is really important that's kind of forgotten from the mental aspect is all of the things besides the physical stuff. The discipline. Kids want to be disciplined, okay? And I think a lot of times coaches want to be their buddy or their teachers want to be their buddy, and they're not. They're doing them a disservice. And as far as developing that mental ability, that comes with the respect and the discipline, all that stuff that we're trying to teach as well. So I think if we keep emphasizing that, it's just not what they do on the field necessarily physically, but all the other things, the teamwork, the whole bit. Keep
Mhm.
stressing
Grant?
that.
Like
I
it?
forget
Grant?
the question. I forget the question. Read read me
What's
the question again.
what systems are in place to monitor and support the athlete's mental well-being, including
Uh,
stress, motivation, and identity development?
I don't even know what all that means.
Well,
I can
It
I can
means
understand
it
I
means
can
if you're
understand
having a
why he
bad
doesn't.
day.
No, I can understand because I don't think there's anything specific out there. It's just more kind of a on the side, it kind of happens. It's not really geared as part of the program. So I understand when he said he didn't know what you were talking about. I didn't either. And I agree. It's just kind of
I'm just not smart enough to make it up. You know,
well, let
no,
me let me
you
say
hey,
do
something.
I can fake
you
it
do
pretty
it.
good.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
let
Well,
me
I learned from Leo. And this one thing I learned at Leo's camp. Nothing is written in stone, right?
Mhm.
So you have to go with the flow. And so if you can't, or you have to adjust on the fly. There's no textbook that tells you how to do that. And that mental health stuff, I think it's a bunch of crap anyway.
But but
But
the
Well,
interesting
I think
thing,
he's I think he's more on the mental aspect that Leo was talking about. And let me say something, Larry, before you get there, because I did find something that said that they called it a feedback loop, and they said it's observation, correction, reflection, reinforcement. So what are we doing with these kids to make them want to come back? If you just scream at the kid, tell him he's no good, you think he wants to come back to practice the next day? The next time he's not going to be. How did you do that one shot, Leo, that makes you want to come back? Even though you made 25 that were horrible, you made the one that was good. That's why we come back, and that's why we do what we do and come back. but how do we, what do we have to tell these people to understand that that's the key to this whole thing is to get these kids to want to come back and want to get better. Because I agree they want to compete, but you don't want them. You had stated something about 80% of the time they're competing and 20% they're learning something. That is exactly the opposite of what the research
It
says.
should be the opposite of that.
The research says 75% practice and 25% game. And we're not doing that. And we're not doing that in youth sport across the country. These kids are lucky if they get an hour or two of practice during the week, and then they go play 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday in these tournaments. And we wonder why they're dead. I've had college coaches. I remember a college softball coach, and he said, I recruit an extra 10 players for the 10 that they're going to quit. And he said, one of the hardest things that he had to do when he got them out of the high schools is to have them understand that there's an off season. Because as soon as they finish the last game in the collegiate season, if they weren't in the playoffs or even if at the playoffs, the bottom line is, what are we doing next weekend? Do we have a tournament? Because that's what they're doing. I just was dealing the other day, one of my sons, his quarterback's daughter. She's 15 years old, and I'm watching her. It's like watching what's his name, Meyer from the Cleveland Clinic, where he's talking about the 12-year-old with a valgus, and then he showed how she blew her knee out when she was 15 because nobody fixed that. And this is an elite level volleyball player at 15, and she's literally going to start a tournament the weekend after her last high school game. And I said, you need to, this is what I see. I see every time you go down, you have great mobility. You have, I don't know what your vertical is, but she gets tall. She can, I don't know what your velocity is on your spike, but every time you land or every time you go into a squat to dig, you valgus your right knee. And you've got tape on your right knee. Why do you have tape on your right knee? Well, because my right knee hurts and my left knee hurts. Well, your left knee hurts because you're overstressing the left to make up for the right. And honestly, and I said, I'm not trying to scare you or your mom and dad or your grandparent who's here. I've known this family. It's Greg's cousin. I said, the best thing you can do is when you finish your last high school game, you go see Greg and spend the next 3 or 4 to 6 months with Greg to fix that. Because if you don't, you are going to have an ACL injury. I can predict this almost 100% because you're already having issues. So I look at that, and one of the things Larry said is just terminology. For God's sakes, Larry once told me in Canada, if you go to a clinic, if you talk about a power position, doesn't matter if you're talking to basketball coaches, football coaches, baseball coaches, volleyball coaches, they all use the same terminology. It doesn't shift across sports. And I don't know that we do that. If I was talking to these guys and you had this, I would make sure that your youth basketball, football, baseball programs are using the same types of terminology so that when they come to the middle school, they understand what the terminology is. When they come to the high school, they understand the terminologies and then go to that loop of, what are you doing to correct them? And then have them think about it and come back. What did you think you did right today? How did you feel you did right? Because a lot of these kids, in my estimation, are kids that are walking off. What is what they call the ride home? Why do most quit sports? Called the ride home. You want to
Mhm.
go home with your grandparents, you want to go with your parents. Because if you go home with your parents, you're going to get a 45-minute lecture on what you did wrong. If you go home with your grandparents, you're going to pizza and ice cream. And they don't need to be told what they did wrong. They need to be encouraged to continue what they did right. So reflect a little bit on that stuff for me.
Uh, Pat, one other thing, and I think all of us do this, but within, it depends upon the size of the training group, but within a reasonable number of 20 or whatever, um, we can read your facial expressions and your body language tell me a lot about, hey, how's the day and how's this training session going to be? And just by facial expressions and body language, I know how the session's going to go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, honestly,
I don't know how scientific it is, but as a coach, my gut tells me this is not going to be a great session, or hey, we've got this one going.
and this morning, my grandson told me it's his first time he's done it. He was doing bench press, but he said, Dad, he said, Papa Bear, I did it with the men's bar. He's 13. It's the first time he's used a men's bar. I said, dude, that's awesome. How did it feel? Because the men's bar we know is bigger, it's longer. What did you feel with that thing? And my emphasis was just the fact that he used a men's bar, not how much weight he lifted or something else. It's the fact that he used a men's bar because he's 13 and I've been telling him, you're going to have to start using the bigger bar eventually here, You might want to start playing around with this thing to see. And, what do we do for that? What are you guys' thoughts on that kind of stuff? Any more? Any less?
I think you champion it, and we talk about competition, but with the kids too, sometimes the competition is their self-competition. It's what they specifically did that may have been more an improvement for themselves specifically. It's their little championship that they win, it's up against themselves. Like, your grandson, he was intimidated about going up on the bar, but he's like, you know what? I'm brave enough today. I'm going to try it. And that was his big thing, that he could get his little hands around it and he could move it. And that's a champion in and of itself.
Yeah, and competition, like Lee was saying, they do compete, but 3-on-3 basketball is competition. 5-on-5 flag football is competition.
Yeah,
It's a lot different than 7-on-7 flag football. And
exactly.
so kids get and using a smaller field as opposed to a bigger field
And I'm even
is
going to the
is
point
different.
where if a kid, runs a lap and it took him 3 minutes to do it, I'm just going to say, and then he did it again a week later, and now he's at 275, that's a win, you
That's right.
know? And
Win
it
the
doesn't
town.
care if all the other kids are going to 2 minutes. It's the fact that
Exactly.
he went from 3 to 2 and 3/4. That's a big deal for him. And those need to be championed just as much as the ones that can go super duper fast. Because if that little individual, if he or she's not excited that they did 1 rep more, or they put their hands on the bigger bar, or they did that little thing, that's what's going to motivate them.
I agree. All right. So if nobody has anything else, I'm going to go question number 4.
Okay.
Um, Question number 4 is how are coaches, parents, and support staff being educated to work together in promoting a healthy, age-appropriate environment for elite performance? And think of this in the level of these guys who have this control over the youth program. What do they need to do in order to create this with the youth, with their youth program that leads to the middle school and the high school? All right, who's up? Larry, you seem to always want to start, so we'll call it on
Well, I guess first that I would say to the parents is we're not creating a basketball player or a volleyball player or a soccer player. We're going to teach the individual to be an athlete. And a good athlete could play any sport that they chose to do. So we'll teach the foundation of physical literacy with all aspects of sport performance, and we will provide that individual with the best instruction possible with um, 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 markers or benchmarks, I guess that's a better word, so that as a first grader or third grader or fifth grader, these are the skills that your son or daughter have been taught. And this keeps the program honest, it keeps the student honest, it keeps the coaches honest, and it keeps the parents honest. These skills were taught. Your son or daughter didn't quite achieve them. As a result, they're everything use the word scaffolding, and everything I think for um, athletic achievement, there is a sequence of development, and one level creates the foundation for the next level.
Okay. Michelle?
Well, I think it starts with maybe getting the parents do need to be involved because they're also they're in that support loop or feedback loop that we talked about when they get home. So if the kid's exhausted, maybe you help them get to bed earlier or emphasize sleeping instead of watching television. And, you're in charge of their nutrition. So maybe making some better choices for your children or eliminating certain things or getting better products of certain things. Um, will help them in their recoveries. Parents can have a huge role in the recovery of their children in their physical journey with all of this. And then support them as well. I think there's a lot of parents too that might either they're living through their child versus something they didn't achieve, or if their child starts to really get athletic, let's just say, and is running and doing things, it might reflect on the parent and they may be like, gosh, now I might have to step up. Well, maybe there's some ways to do that. Like I said, let's play catch. Let's go for a walk. Maybe while you're at doing your soccer skills practice, I'm going to go do a lap around the soccer field or something like that that shows that the parents are thinking about their physical literacy with the children with their children, and then the coaches can help support them. Say the coach can say, hey, you know what, your son needs a little bit more help with throwing. How about on Saturday, here's a glove, toss a ball with him. He needs to practice the grounder, so throw them more on the ground. You then they could go to a park for an hour or the backyard for an hour or whatever. And there's some other lessons being taught that a parent could teach, not necessarily has to have a coaching degree, but or high ball, whatever the case is that the kid needs to practice, the parent can help emphasize that over the weekends.
Leo?
I kind of relate it to what we do in the weight room, where I think a lot of people think that the stuff we do in the weight room is very sports specific, and it's really not. I have kids say, "Well, are you gonna make me a better football player?" No, I'll make you bigger and faster and stronger. The coaches will take care of the skill work to make you a better football player.
Yeah.
I'll take care of that part. Well, it's the same thing with the physical literacy stuff. Okay, we're not doing that. We're not teaching that, but the coaches should be to make them better, have better athletic ability, and therefore that's going to relate to being better on the football field or the volleyball court or whatever. So they have to understand that what we do in the weight room is helping develop their physical qualities, and what the coach is doing is developing their skill qualities to make them have better physical literacy and therefore a better athlete in whatever sport it is. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
it does.
that's how I correlate it.
Grant?
Well, I think I agree with Leo. The whole idea is to give you tools so that you become better at your sport. It's not to make you a better football player. That's our job.
Right.
Our job is to give them the tools, right? And so,
Yeah.
I agree with what Leo said. Makes a lot of sense to me. So,
Well, I agree with all of it. I think that when you speak about the question of parents and support staff, that's one of the things that they could have some control over because they're controlling these lower division sports. So they could have some orientation meetings with youth coaches and parents to explain just exactly why we're here. Because one of the things we talk about all the time is in parent involvement and education. We need to explain to them what we're doing. As Leo said, the weight room is not necessarily there to make you a better football player. It's to make you a better athlete. It makes you healthier and stronger so that you can be a better whatever you want to be. And I think in the past people asked me, how would you train a cross country player as opposed to a football player? Not a whole lot different as far as the weight room is concerned. But I'm not trying to make you a cross country runner. I'm not. It's not my fault if you don't throw for 5,000 yards this season. You might try to blame me, but if you blow your knee out, you can come see me. What did I do to prevent that? but we forgot exactly what we're doing. And when you look at encouraging these guys in multiple sports at the youth level, all these things make you better. Why did Kobe Bryant like soccer so much? Because it made him a better basketball player. Why did these guys, we look at these guys and they're making millions of dollars in one sport, but that's not the sport they really wanted to play. They wanted to play soccer. What's the hardest problem about taking Aaron Rodgers to England for an NFL game? He's going to go watch a soccer game. That's a little crazy. Why is that guy doing that? Because he likes soccer. You know, I think one of the crazy things we don't do a lot in our schools is lacrosse and things like team handball. Those are great sports. But I think that the thing that we look at here with all these people is we got to sell the idea of build the athlete first, and then let the kid choose his sport, and then let him go get sports skills from that coach, and not think that one person is going to do it all. And the realization that all sports help all sports. Multiple sport athletes survive longer than one sport athletes. It's been proven again and again.
So how do we build the athlete?
We go back to physical literacy. You know, we do the same thing. We go back to that thing that we talk about, and then we observe and we encourage and we correct the bad movements, and we reflect on what's better movements, what they did right, what did they do wrong, reinforce them, they bring them back. We give them an opportunity to compete at a smaller scale rather than a larger scale. I mean, come on. You're going to really take a bunch of 7-year-olds and take them out and play 5-on-5 flag football on a high school football field? How stupid is that? And they can't even throw the ball halfway across the field to begin with. So we need to get rid of those kinds of things and go to the smaller courts. I mean, what did they say to do? I thought that they did it, Larry, but they said you take hockey instead of playing on one game on a large hockey rink, you play 3 games on a large hockey rink by going cross field. You can take your PE class and you can create 5 20-yard by 50-yard football fields on one high school football field and play 5-on-5, football, flag football. You don't need all that space. You can cut it down to a smaller space. And what have you said 1,000 times about foosball, Grant? In foosball down in Brazil, they play this thing
Football.
indoors. They
Football.
handle, yeah, they handle the ball more because it's a
Yeah.
smaller court. They say four people for the United States surround a Brazilian soccer player. Who's going to come out with the ball? The Brazilian soccer player, because he's handled the ball more. We don't do that. So those
Okay,
are things I think that. Go ahead.
but let's take it down to a lower level.
Mhm.
Okay, you want to know how parents are involved. You have to take them down to the physical literacy, because they're the parents, or an aunt and uncle or somebody, are the ones that begin all this.
Absolutely.
So we have to stop and look at what is physical literacy. And I'll show you a chart here real quick. I think you've all seen this.
Guys, I
There
hate
it
to
is.
do this.
Well,
Guys, I hate to do this, but I really do have to bug out. My wife had surgery today, and it took an hour away from. I got to get back. Okay, so
Thank
all right.
you.
let me know when.
See you, buddy.
Let me know when the next thing is. Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
It'll be a couple, 3 weeks. Thank you,
All
Leo,
right.
for getting in.
All right.
Hope
Bye,
your
Yes,
everybody.
wife's
it will.
okay.
All right.
See
Take
you,
Hope
care.
your
Leo.
wife's okay. Go ahead,
So
Grant.
so if you look at this, it's walking, running, balance, skating, skiing, jumping, swimming, cycling, skipping, throwing, kicking, striking, catching, and trapping. Okay, if you can do all of those things, you can play any sport that's around. Okay, and if you look at, and I don't know if you can see how far this goes over, but if you look at, all these things should be accomplished by the time they're 7 or 8 years old. They should have, not that it's perfected, but it started. I can throw a ball or a tennis ball, whatever it is. It started It's all these other things. Okay. Well, if I can do that, all you have to do is teach me the rules of the game, and I'm good to go with that. Okay. So, if and all this stuff can be done at home.
Mm-hmm.
This starts with parents. This starts from year 1 to 7 or 8, and then if you can't do it by 8 or 9 years old, you have to go into, I call it, I've told you this before, I call it special ed gym class to teach you how to do this. Okay, that does include what I would throw in, and that is jumping rope, that is gymnastics, and those sorts of things. Okay, so look at this list. We have coordination, we have sports skill, we have strength development in there. We have all the things that we're talking about to create an athlete are in those things. Okay, so and if you look at sensitive periods, what sensitive periods come first in the development of a child? Speed, coordination, rhythm, agility, all these simple things, and all we want to do is rush them in. Oh, when are we going to do the Olympic lifts? When are we going to teach them how to lift weights? They can't even do some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
See,
The important thing to tell you is that most of these things, maybe not swimming and cycling, but other than that, most of the rest of that stuff are in the California State Department physical education curriculum in the state of California in first, second, third grade. Those things are all there, and we're not doing
okay.
them because
So-
we're not.
so-
And whose fault is it we're not doing them?
Well, it's the parents' fault, and
It's the parents' fault. But
it's the
does the
school
parent
system's fault.
is the parent educated enough? And I've had this conversation with parents. Are parents educated enough to go in front of a school board or sit there in front of a principal and say, "This is what my child is supposed to be doing in physical education in the first grade. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this?" Is the parent smart enough to go before the recreation department and say, "These are the things that my child should be learning in a
Mm-hmm.
sixth grade basketball program? Why aren't you teaching this? Why are we just throwing the ball out and playing the game? Why aren't we
But
teaching this
but
rather than
that
just
stuff should be taught at home, or the
it
beginning
should
of
be
it should be taught at
absolutely,
home.
but it should
Okay,
sure as heck be reinforced
and
at the school,
well,
because it's
that's
in the
true,
curriculum.
but I understand that, but it's also reinforced with the sport coach.
Exactly.
Okay, and so then that's how you get this thing developed. So that by the time they're in high school, I don't have to teach a kid how to get into a 3-point stance like I've had to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
I agree.
we've all had to do stuff like that. And
Absolutely.
so if you can do that, and even if I have to teach them, they're coordinated enough to get in those positions, and they're I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but anyway, they have the ability to do these things. Okay,
You're
so
100% right.
there's the, you want to get into it. Well, parents, you want your kid to be a better athlete. Number one, marry the right spouse. Number two, go out and do these things with your kid. Play catch with them, and if you can't throw a ball, get somebody who can throw a ball and have them go out and play catch with the kid. What kid doesn't like to go out and play catch?
I agree.
And it doesn't have to be for an hour. It doesn't have to be for 10 minutes. You let the kid decide. Okay, I'm done playing this. Let's do something else. Okay, what do you want to do? Oh, let's ride a bike. All right, let's go do that. See, and all those things. Well, I've been looking up if jump rope at a pre-adolescent stage or prepubescent stage um, uh, affects the tendons and ligaments to make them stiffer so that you can run faster, right? What I'm finding out is that no, it doesn't. But you know what it does do? It it makes the legs stronger, it makes the upper body stronger, and it gives great coordination.
I'll tell you, one of
Okay,
the scariest. Right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to finish. The thing about the stiffness in the tendons and ligaments and the muscles doesn't come until they're around 12 or 13 years old. But it has all these other different qualities. So the jumping rope is good. And how many kids can't jump rope now?
Absolutely. You're right.
So go
Well,
ahead.
I've
I'm
also
sorry.
noticed
I
too
didn't
with
mean to interrupt you.
with jumping rope, to continue on with what Rufus said, it's jumping rope also can help you with your posture. Because when you're jumping rope, you can't really be bent over, you can't really have arches, and so it actually helps develop the spine and core strength to keep you in alignment better too.
One of the worst things, I'll just reflect on that one. One of the worst things we have going on is everybody thinks core strength is developed by doing sit-ups,
No.
and that's a mess. But when it comes to, I used to do this too. I used to get the first couple of days of school. I had all the kids together. We were explaining where we're going, what we're doing. I would take 10 boys and 10 girls and bring them out in front of class. Then I would take 8 boys and move them over here to the right, and then I would take 2 girls and move them over here to this way, to the left or the right. I go. So here's the statistic, guys. We have 10 girls and 10 boys. 8 out of the 10 boys are not going to have an ACL injury issue in between 11 and 14 years old, but 8 out of the 10 girls are. And why is this happening? And one of the things they found in the PEP study is we don't teach girls how to land. So you go out there with a bunch of kids in 7th grade and have them jump up and land, and you find that 80% of the girls land stiff-legged. Nobody taught them how to land. And one of the number one reasons for blowing an ACL, Larry, you and I both know this, is deceleration. So we didn't teach our kids how to decelerate. Then we wonder why they have these problems. Grant, why do you do the 10-meter sprint drill? What's some classic examples of what's good? They have to accelerate and decelerate.
Yep.
This is all great stuff, but we're not doing this. One of the biggest problems I see and it's not a problem, but I think I said something out to you guys about this. I'm watching all the stuff from the Agile Rhythm, and this stuff, and I'm going, God, the scariest part of this is we did all this stuff 40 years ago in our PE classes. We're just not doing it anymore. We have to re-educate the people that are doing it, and we have to re-educate parents because parents don't know what to expect. So for these guys, I think they have the perfect storm because they have some kind of control over youth programs to middle school programs to high school programs. Are they going to create this in 1 or 2 years? No. The question you have to ask is, let's take these 7 or 8 years old and let's see where do we want them by the time they're 15 in high school, and then start building that. And so they've got to develop that type of stuff. But they have to educate the parents and the youth coaches to not have so much expectation at such a young level. I mean, what is our biggest hate about AAU basketball? You got all these kids, and what are you doing? 5 of them are playing, and 7 or 8 of them are sitting on the sideline not doing anything. Well, how long do I want to do this? Or for a parent, how much money do I want to spend on my child to not play? This is crazy. You shouldn't have this. We need to spend more time playing. And all of this leads into the next question, okay? Because this is the last question this guy had. How do you do remedial athletic development on a kid who didn't do anything from the age of 8 to 15? Because the individual adaptation profiles kill, he says, individual profiles kill me. How do you do block periodization on a kid that doesn't know how to do anything? You're right. So what do we need to do? And this kind of leads into Nick's thing, I think, where what do I do with a bunch of 10-year-old girls for that I can help them develop some athletic skills that they can remediate the things that they haven't done. So where are we at? I'm going to say dynamic warm-ups. I'm going to take that 15 minutes. You know, I watched a thing with Jimmy Radcliffe this last summer at the high school strength coaches conference, and he told us what they were doing with the athletes at Oregon, and they all do it. It doesn't matter. He says you line up. Oh, you got some basketball players here, some soccer players here, some football players. Every position, they all do the same warm up, and it's all based on athletic movements, just movements, just movement skills. And he says we do this pretty rapid and get it done in 5 minutes. And that's our goal is to do it all in 5 minutes. Well, what is 5 minutes of your practice? You know, what is 10 minutes for you to 15 minutes to teach a dynamic warm up, which is multiple skills hopping, skipping, jumping, doing forward lunges, backward lunges, side lunges, doing things like this, and that you can do with your athletes at these ages that are going to help them develop some skills that they don't have, you know, and they don't have them. And this helps everybody get better, not just the person who's not very good. It helps the guy that's pretty good also, because we're reinforcing their movement patterns and their strength movements so that they could be a better athlete. At the same time, we're enforcing a kid who doesn't have those skills to get better. Okay, that's my 10 cents on it. What do you guys have on that? Larry?
Well, I agree. You know, the interesting thing, you know, and this is just who I am. I think the idea of learning body control and awareness and direction and movement is very important. Just minor stuff. Can you shrug? Can you flex at the hip versus bend? Can you rotate the trunk? Just an awareness, excuse me, of just body control. I'm a big advocate. You can't take two steps until you can control one. So we do a lot of linear, lateral, diagonal, and vertical controlled movement. And then I start with after I get basically static movement, one step and back versus a linear or lateral series or whatever. And then once we've controlled that aspect, then I kind of go into some kind of balance. I want them to be aware of what's it like to be up on the ball of the foot? What's it like to walk in a linear pattern, heel to toe? And within any group, there's always somebody that's very talented, and then there's always somebody that's my God, they can't walk or chew gum at the same time. So within a group, I think you have to challenge the studs or studettes with additional something while you're trying to at least get the kid that's struggling to um, at least perform in a manner that quote wins their day. And then after we've done the basic stuff that I sort of feel comfortable, then we start with the warm up stuff, the linear, the skips and lunges, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but but to a physical education teacher or to a sport coach, oh my God, you're taking my whole session and I'm not going to do this and I'm not what. I might ask them give me 5 minutes. And within that 5 minutes, I'm not going to build a lot of things at a time. But if you put 5 minutes every practice session, it eventually will get to the goals. It takes longer, but the idea of uh, I always tell coaches, if especially youth coaches, I would like to work with your athletes, or we need to work with your athletes before your season, if we can, before your competitive season. Just give us 8 sessions, 10 sessions, if you will, or 10 different days, if you will, and we can cover a lot of basic fundamentals that's important to me or important to the kid. And I should have prefaced all of this with we start with athletic position and power position so the kid knows where their body parts are and where they need to be for either in a strength element. From a power position, I want the heel down so that we can pull, press, and squat out of it. But in a athletic position, I want the weight shifted more to the ball of the foot so that we can move in 4 directions. And off of this is just a sequential build and correct and or teach, correct, and reinforce. And it's a slow process, but I think if the kid knows these are the standards, um, we're going to try to help you become a better athlete.
I just sent you guys something. Michelle, yours is an email. Larry and Grant, I sent it on a text. For some reason, I'm sending it off my iPad, and your phone number is not on my iPad here, Michelle. But I can send it to you right now, text. But what I'm going to do is tell me what your phone number is.
Oh, mine?
Yeah,
702
wait a minute. 782
702
702
595
595
9300.
9300.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I just sent you that. But I thought this was an interesting chart. It said failed to send. So let me do this again.
702.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me find it again. Okay, so I'm going to take this and more. 702
595
595
93.
93.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
00. And everyone can call me on the recording.
Okay, see
Oh,
if
wait.
that came up. Because I thought this was kind of an interesting chart. Because it said drill progression overview. And it said movement literacy, what the goal is teach specific efficient patterns. Drills
Oh,
would be animal walks, wall squats, stick hinges, for example. Focus, posture, tactical cues, joint awareness. The next thing would be strength integration, which would be layer control, excuse me, control onto clean movement. Tempo squats, hard lunges, band lunges, push-up variations. It would be bracing, alignment, and breathing. Then resilience and adaptability, which would be preparing for dynamic sport demands, reactive jumps, crossover, balance, mirror skills, recovery, response, failure. I thought that was kind of an interesting chart.
I got both of them on email too, so.
Okay. I don't know if you guys, I think that if you do a dynamic warm up and try to enhance all of that over a period of time, it's pretty not a, I don't know, to me, it's not a bad outline of what you might want to try to be doing. What are your thoughts?
Stop and think about who your audience is.
Well, I think right now, when we deal with these guys, it's like they're trying to teach coaches and parents what they're trying to do, in a
I
sense
understand that,
of
but
what. Go ahead.
what was Nick's question?
Nick's question was, what do I need to do? What's a series of things he can do with a bunch of 10-year-old soccer girls as a warm up, at the
Who's
time
the
of a
audience?
dynamic warm up? They're 10-year-old
Okay,
soccer girls.
exactly?
Right.
You think you're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes teaching a bunch of girls, um, God dang it, drills? Why not? Why not play? Why not have sack races, um, uh, um, volleyball with a balloon?
This is what they're going to do before
Uh,
practice.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the purpose is to warm them up, right? Okay,
Yeah.
give them games where we're going to include all this stuff. What's a sack race? Jumping rope, right?
Hmm.
What's a 10-meter race? It's a sprint. It's a speed development thing, right?
Hmm.
So, okay, so we can do all that instead of doing lunge, hold this here, and blah blah blah. Do all those kind of things. Let them make it a game, and you're gonna get more out of them
Okay. I agree with that.
if you do it.
Yeah.
I'm looking right now for there's a guy that coaches. I think it's the German women's national volleyball team, and I'm looking. He's on Instagram, and I'm looking for it right now. And he does all this stuff with his volleyball players. And there's a time to drill, and then there's a time to warm up. Well, why make warming up boring? Let's go have some fun. They're 10. Okay, we are 10 and under. We have all this time to do all this other stuff in different environments. Okay, let's get them so that they enjoy coming to practice because they know there's going to be some sort of different game, or something that we're going to do, and I can't find this guy. And so, why limit what you're going to do because we have to do some sort of training, weightlifting training, movement training, or whatever it is? When if you get if kids that age, their minds are very plastic, and so they change very quickly. Okay, and I don't need to sit here and stretch them because they're not going to be gymnasts. So let the dynamic warm up be tag, let it be races, let it be volleyball with a balloon. I'm just throwing out examples. You can think of 100 other games that you can play with them. That's going to get the desired effect of the warm up. Make them more coordinated, make them stronger, and get them ready for the practice.
I agree.
Remember,
Okay.
Yeah.
their attention span's not that long to begin with,
Right.
Correct. I
and
agree.
and they're girls, which means their attention span for sport is going to be less long than the boys necessarily.
FIFA actually has a warm up that they've created for soccer kids. Um, my daughter did pretty much the same warm up. It was kind of like walking, hips, rotating your hips outward, bringing your knees in,
Yeah.
more joint oriented, a little bit to get the muscles warmed up. Um, I just kind of Googled it, but you could put in, you know, FIFA warm up with kids, FIFA warm up
Yeah.
kids. There's a
It's
bunch of
very
videos, and that might be
very
a good
very
foundation
similar
for
to
him.
the PEP program's warm up. The PEP program, which was a study done in Santa Monica with 5,000 kids, is where they come up with those statistics. And they said by doing the dynamic warm up, no matter how you do it, whether you do it that way or where Grant's saying, you can eliminate about 80 to 90% of those injuries if we
Right.
would just do those things. So there's a specific reason to do those things. But then it still comes down to how do we educate the parents to know that we need to do these things, because one of the number one reasons they found on coaches on why they don't do this is they don't have time. So they don't have time. So like Grant says, if you can do this fast, it doesn't take a
Yeah.
lot of time,
Yeah,
you know.
Grant, I agree. I see nothing wrong with sack races, etc. You're warming them up. Yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even Jimmy Radcliffe said, we do this in 5 minutes, but we don't rest. We're just constantly on the move. There's 50 to 100 kids that are athletes at that sport, at that whatever sport they're doing, that are constantly on the move in this standard warm up that they do, and they're doing all kinds of stuff, but they're moving the whole time. And he said, our goal is to get it done in 5 minutes. So if we can spend, I just don't think 5 minutes is too much to spend if you can eliminate 80% of these types of injuries. So I think that's a key emphasis. So no, I like that, Grant. And I thought to talk to Nick later
Here,
tonight.
Pat. I'm gonna if you guys don't mind, let me just show you this quick video
Okay.
of this of just an example of a warm up.
Okay.
Shoot, now where is it? Um, there it is. Okay. All right. Can you all see this?
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yep, I do.
Okay. Okay. So they have another one where they play leapfrog over the hurdle, or I mean over the
Hula
thing, the hula hoop as it's moving. So they would jump over. So what are we doing? We're bending, we're moving, we're getting warmed up, and we're not doing all this stuff.
You're not doing just drills for drills.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
See,
like that.
but we're getting what we want out of it, and this guy, if you're on Instagram, it's Rettasaurus, Retasaurus, and I think this is the national German women's volleyball team. And so yeah, there you go. Now you can see a little bit better what they're trying to do. Little kids would love doing that. Oh, you mean we get to dive through this?
Oh yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like what
So
he's doing. Anticipation, reaction,
sure.
volleyball specific dives. That's very similar to soccer, and it's purely entertainment, and they're having fun.
Uh-huh.
I, they could do
Yeah.
this on the grass and have a great time and do lots of things. So no, I agree. I like this. I like it
So
100%.
and that guy, I've heard him speak. Is a really smart guy. Well, anyway,
Well, I'll tell
so
you.
especially with kids, we spend too much time trying to do all these things, right? When a lot of the stuff can be taken care of through a game or something.
I
Mhm.
agree. I agree. I like it. I am going to, if nobody has anything else, I'm going to say thank you all for being on here. I am going to turn this video off, and I am going to send the video once it converts to Johansson to because this is basically about the things that those guys wanted to know. And I think he's going to try to get them on the next time. And so I'm going to turn this thing off. And thank you again for being on here.